Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
In episode 11, I am joined by Steve Slesinski, Director of Global Product Planning at Dana Commercial Vehicles, where we talk about his 40 years in the commercial vehicle industry, the E-transition, why electric vehicles make sense in medium-duty markets, a bit on hybrid vehicles and electric yard tractors, and when he thinks EVs will see widespread adoption. Today I'm joining me Steve Slesinski. Steve's the Director of Global Product Planning for Dana Commercial Vehicles. Hello, Steve. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, so there's some talk out in the industry that wondering if I'll ever run out of friends. So I'm planning on doing this for years. So I consider you a friend, and we've been known each other maybe, 8 or 10 years or more. But let's start with a little bit about your background. And then go into Dana and Dana's history in commercial vehicles, and just kind of set the stage for this conversation.
Well, sure, Mike. Thanks for that. I do consider you a friend as well. But you probably haven't known me my entire career, but believe it or not, I've been in the commercial vehicle industry now for about 40 years. And of those 40 years, I spent roughly 18 years or so in various engineering roles, developing drivetrain components and systems. Like steer axles, drive axles, transmissions, suspensions, brakes, wheel ends, drive shafts, and tire management systems.
Wow.
So very familiar with the commercial vehicle market as well as the drivetrain and powertrain systems. In my role as Global Product Planning Director, I'm responsible to manage all the traditional products I just mentioned, as well as electric propulsion products and any future products Dana currently has in the pipeline. And likely your listeners know, Dana entered into the transportation industry over 116 years ago by inventing and productionizing the encased universal joint. And that's used for drive shafts. And this innovation essentially obsoleted the need for a chain drive in vehicles.
Yeah, that was a pretty big deal, and we're going to talk about another big one in electric trucks coming up, but because sometimes we kind of forget that this industry has had disruption and big change throughout. So really sometimes we look at these new things and think, oh my God, it's all this, it's totally new and different. But that's kind of the nature of the work we do, is reinventing stuff and bringing new products and innovations to market.
Yeah, I agree. And looking back in my career, one of the biggest innovations besides electric vehicles, previously was things like ABS braking systems or emission control systems. And now, again, electrification, I think, really is really significant compared to some of the other innovations we've seen over the last 40, 50 years or so.
Yeah. So I was reading some of the things with Dana, and I think you even called this an E-transition. How would you describe it?
Well, it's a transition because it's not going to happen overnight. So this is not a light switch event, but we see an evolution of moving from internal combustion engine conveyance to electrified conveyance systems. And as you probably know, we engineer, manufacture, and distribute power conveyance and energy management solutions for all the mobility markets, whether it's light vehicle, commercial vehicle, mobile off-highway, as well as stationary industrial. So again, Dana's got a broad breadth of product in which to enable this evolution in electrified systems.
Yeah, and a lot of history in solving, these customers' problems, and the markets well, and a lot of diversity, and or maybe a better term would be just variations in all of this market. And so at NACFE, we've been looking at this and trying to figure out who will electrify first, and for the most part, we've been saying medium duty electric trucks because they're closer to home and just don't need the bigger battery packs of heavy duty. Do you guys see that as well?
Well, we do. And again, as far as this evolution, Dana had to make significant investments and change the way we go to market and the products that we offer. When people talk about electrified vehicles, Mike, the first thing that comes to mind is, I need a big electric motor and move this vehicle. But they forget about all the other things on the vehicle that are now going to be electric. So all the accessory drives, and then now we have to add in charging systems and controls and software. So it's going to be a entirely different architecture from what we're used to today. And to your point about medium duty and some other vocations, they're likely going to be the front runners of implementing this technology because from a duty cycle and application perspective, those make the most sense right now. In my mind, applications such as say people transit, like buses in China, for example, have really adopted electric vehicles for the most part entirely. School buses, again, are another ideally suited battery electric propulsion application. Any of these vocations that have a somewhat repeatable duty cycle, and we like to think of duty cycles that are maybe less than 200 miles per day, are really the prime candidates for battery electric solutions.
Yeah, so it's those that predictable routes, return to base, maybe long dwell times. In the early periods, you think about like package delivery. School buses is a good example. I mean, school kids don't go to. There's not a second shift for schools,
Right.
or at least there isn't right now. The shorter the mileage, the easier to electrify it. Of course, there's not as much fuel to save. So, the cost benefit of not burning, $3 or $4 diesel or whatever, we want to put into the calculator and using, electricity, the lower the miles, the less savings there. So that makes it maybe not as valuable or as good a place for electric. But, right now in this transition, as we're talking about, we really need to put the trucks where they'll be most successful. So, predictable routes. With that predictable routes, also, you kind of know the geography that it's dealing with, and you don't have to worry about it going over the Rocky Mountains or something, right?
Right. Although going down the Rocky Mountains actually generates energy for the vehicle. So that isn't all bad either. Yet most of these folks don't necessarily implement electric vehicles because of the fuel savings alone. As you know, like school buses travel probably 10 to 15,000 miles a year. So there's not a lot of fuel burned. But if you look at the total cost of ownership, the fact that these vehicles now are very, very quiet, they're easier, I think, to drive. They have regenerative braking capability so that instead of stopping and burning up brakes through heat and friction, you're actually generating energy back in the battery packs. So there's a holistic approach of battery electric vehicles, and thinking about it from maybe the well to the wheel use of energy and the sustainability that we're all striving to achieve in business going forward.
I'm glad you brought that up because around these, what we call hard to monetize benefits, like easy to drive or less noise, some of those features of an electric truck, seem to be good and a benefit and, might very well be something that's monetized by a fleet. Zero emission, it can drive right into the warehouse without exhaust systems. I was talking to some package delivery people where they spend a lot of money on exhaust in warehouses because of current gasoline and diesel trucks.
Absolutely. That's a great example. I think two of the things that are hard to get used to with driving these electric commercial vehicles is one, there's no sound. So it's difficult to tell if the vehicle's ready to go or not. And certainly you just, again, push on the accelerator pedal and the vehicle moves. So that's something to get used to. The other one is the regenerative braking. Can be programmed differently, but by simply taking your foot off the accelerator, the vehicle will start to brake based on how it's programmed. So that is a little bit different for the drivers. So you're essentially almost running a single pedal operation now in vehicles.
Yeah. So what is, I'm guessing there's a lot of detail you mentioned earlier around different components. As a component manufacturer, kind of that Dana is, I mean, I know you work up the chain into the, truck manufacturing to help your OEM partners, but what are we yet to learn or what is, as you're digging into the details of, transmissions or not transmissions, wheel end motors or this or that, what kind of are you learning about the battery electric powertrain that maybe is either a surprise to you or might be to the listeners as you work to help exploit the benefits and move up the adoption curve?
I think the biggest surprise to many of our fleet customers is the significant cost difference to add range to a vehicle, where today you just simply add more fuel when you need to go further. If electric vehicles, you need to spec the vehicle with the right size battery pack, which tends to add a lot of cost to the vehicle up front. So the fleet customer that might have maybe a capital budget and an operational budget, you're really moving money from the operational budget into the capital budget by paying up front for the battery packs.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that gets to how this technology might change the way fleets operate. I mean, there's no way that the electric truck just will not do everything the diesel truck will, and probably the diesel truck won't do all the electric truck will. So, figuring out how to operate these new trucks, it might be such that a driver jumps in a different truck each day if one has a longer capability than the other. That's a kind of a good way to segue into an area NACFI's been working on, and that's sort of this longer day cab class 8 heavy duty tractor electrification, where it will be a bigger battery pack to do the call it 200, 300, 400 mile range. And I don't think we're there yet. I mean, companies are talking about maybe a 250-mile range in their first offerings, but that has still some of these elements of medium duty that you were talking to, return to base, predictable routes. We're even suggesting that maybe that there's more of that with e-commerce coming. So what do you think about this regional haul market for electric trucks?
Well, I look at regional haul as really class 8 regional haul as being more of a big version of a class 6 truck. So frankly, you're just hauling bigger loads throughout the city. And you're right, they may go up to say 250-mile range or so. Those trucks generally have more space on board to put some more batteries and have the the weight carrying capacity to actually haul more batteries along with its load as well. But again, these regional haul trucks, if there's a known duty cycle and you can plug them in at night or during the day if you're driving at night, that still works out very well for these regional haul applications.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think that's kind of a growth. I mean, that gets back to my point earlier around, the more miles traveled, the more fuel saved. And, that does help with the whole economics of electric trucks. So, I think you're right, medium first, urban first, buses. And then let's just see how far the battery can go, especially, maybe that's like a colloquialism here.
As you know, Mike, the battery technology continues to evolve and change. So the power density of the batteries going up, the cost of the batteries are coming down. There's lots of innovation and money being spent into battery development today. So I expect the technology there to continue to evolve. And then, as you're aware, there's also the option for hydrogen fueling, where using a fuel cell on board and significantly changing the charge cycle. So you can use a vehicle more than, say, one shift a day if it ends up being a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle versus a battery electric fuel cell.
We may look back at the time where it was just diesel engines and kind of thought, man, it was simple back then, because we haven't even talked about hybrids yet. Does Dana sort of have an opinion around, hybrids? I mean, in that case, you kind of end up with both a diesel truck and an electric truck mashed together. And, I guess it's more complex, but does help with the range.
Yeah, absolutely. We think for on-highway long-haul service, the best solution right now is really a hybrid solution. Again, unpredictable duty cycles, take the benefit of hills and starting and stopping to repower the battery pack, using a battery pack for APU hoteling capability that saves fuel, reduces emissions is a great benefit that can be implemented now on existing chassis. So we don't have to wait for a brand new vehicle architecture. We don't have to wait for charging infrastructure to be set up along every route a vehicle might travel with the hybrid solutions for Class 8 line haul.
Yeah. And so I also wanted to ask you about, another product Dana's been working on. And I think it was about this time last year, maybe it was in October, where NACFI had our finale at Atlanta for Run on Less Regional. And we shared a press room with Dana, and it was a yard tractor, electric yard tractor, right? A lot of the industry doesn't think about yard tractors. It's off highway, it's kind of special use, but how is that going? And do you see yard tractors being a early adopter of electric trucks?
Actually, Mike, I think it's a great application because The yard tractors hauling trailers around a yard predominantly have a very predictable duty cycle. They tend to stay very close to the home base. Some of them actually leave the yard and come back, but they tend to stay very close to the home base. And it can be very effective and justifies itself in regions where they already have accessibility to low cost energy. So Texas, for example, has some very attractive energy rates. So using a yard spotter application in Texas, for example, can be extremely viable in many of the applications.
You know, I'm on TMC committees, and S11 launched an electric yard tractor study group about 2 or 3 years ago. And I remember sitting there thinking, yeah, okay, so what, and not really thinking much about it. And I've kind of turned 180 degrees as well. I mean, I think, it's a great place to learn with kind of a captive area. The other thing I was told recently is that, with their lot of idle time, a lot of low RPM use, that these trucks don't particularly like the after treatment that's now needed on trucks. But I do wonder, I mean, how many, I think a lot of these though are used around the clock almost. So they'd have to go with some pretty fast charging would be my guess. Do you know much about that, Steve?
Yeah, actually, one of the specs that we're developing for our customer is required to be in operation for 22 hours a day with availability for 2 hours worth of charging.
Wow.
So they're fast charging, we're cooling the batteries as you're charging them to get the vehicle back into operation. Your point about the internal combustion engine and the diesel particulate issues that they have because they never run very high RPMs is a huge maintenance issue for vehicles in general. So the fact that there are no more DPFs on board a internal combustion engine vehicle, that could be a significant benefit to the maintenance operators at these fleets.
A question I want to ask you that's a little different than some of the other guests I've had. So, I had Elizabeth Fretheim at Nikola on a couple of weeks ago, and when I was talking to her, I mean, their whole organization is focused on electrification, whether it's battery electric or fuel cell, and they're not worrying with internal combustion engines, and Dana and other companies that are out there who been around 116 years or a long time having to deal with this. And we talked about it a little bit at the kickoff, but how is it culturally at Dana, where I gotta believe that over your career and now going forward, there's a lot more electrical engineers running around the building. Myself as a mechanical engineer, I've struggled to understand kilowatt hours and voltages and on and on. How's Dana dealing with this new competency that you have to have? I guess there's probably days where it's going smooth and others where it can be a real challenge.
Well, actually, since you're probably more familiar, Mike, with the commercial vehicle portion of Dana, on the off-highway side, Dana's been doing electronically controlled transmissions and systems for well over 20 years. So within Dana, we have these core competencies in locations around the world that we're actually leveraging with electrification of the commercial vehicle market. I think in addition to that, we've acquired some really good companies that have a nice cultural fit for Dana. The TM4 motors and inverters, the folks at TM4 were integrated into the Dana system. They're one of the same of any other Dana employee that we've had here for some time. Other companies that we acquired, such as Nordressa, that does full vehicle integration capabilities and software battery management systems. Those folks are all integrated in as well. And we've had a transfer of information. We've been moving people across the locations, having a great team effort, working on joint programs together with our end customer. So I think culturally, people want to move towards electrified portion of things. The traditional products are not going away anytime soon. We've got, as you can imagine, significant expertise in those already, but this gives those folks a chance to learn more and extend their careers in a new and exciting way here at Dana.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it sounds like Dana's taken a real sort of proactive and strategic and planned approach to get to keep transfer those competencies amongst your divisions and then go get them. And, I also see that it's such an exciting time to be in commercial vehicles. And I think we're attracting talent with, electrification, even automation. These are exciting times. And, when you think about young engineers, I have the privilege of giving this year's SAE Buckendale lecture, and I'm excited to share some thoughts about the future of commercial vehicles to keep those young engineers very excited. And I think these new technologies offer that to them.
It absolutely does. Again, it's an exciting time. You think about everything that electrified propulsion systems can offer a vehicle in terms of duty cycle improvement, instantaneous torque, productivity, less maintenance. It's really an exciting time to be part of commercial vehicle.
Yeah, so let's close this time together, Steve, with us like a real practical, maybe even pragmatic question or thought, and maybe we can each share some thoughts. With this new electrification transition occurring, are we as an industry spending too much time on it, or just enough? I think we need to keep improving, our traditional projects while we find the, value of these innovations. But, we're also in a pandemic and in a tough time where we've got to make some tough decisions. So how do you think the industry's doing, and sort of maybe what's, kind of Dana's, particular thought on that subject?
Well, I think the pandemic obviously slowed down a lot of things overall in general, but the electrification portion of the business has continued steadfast. The volume isn't significant right now in electrified systems, so we don't see a big downturn in activity there with our ongoing projects. If you look out in time, and people always ask, when are electrified vehicles going to take over the market? And I'll just go out maybe 5 years. In 2025, I think that's the time that people should try it and you'll like it scenario. You need to start getting your drivers, technicians on board, developing processes for charging, inspections, and servicing the vehicle. So that has to happen between now and say 2025 as we start improving the presence of these vehicles. By probably 2030, fleets are going to start speccing a significant portion of their operation as a battery electric vehicle. Just like they put in a mix of vehicle types today of maybe different brands and truck sizes, they're going to have electrified vehicles as being a significant part of their spec going forward, I think, in the next 10 years.
Yeah, so you really can't sit on the sidelines. You have to understand the trucks, the speccing of the trucks, the duty cycles, all of what we've talked about. But, there's also an area that we haven't spent much time on in this time together, Steve, and that's the infrastructure and, getting utilities and figuring out where to put the charging and how much to put, how many trucks at a time, and all that takes a lot of time and effort. And so I think, the advice here is that, it's coming. And the earlier you get involved, the better. Starting to ask those tough questions and learn. And then, as the transition occurs, as you called it, the E-transition, we can take advantage of it.
Absolutely, it's coming, and there's nothing like improving the adoption rate by changing, legislation to require it, such as you only allow, zero emission vehicles into cities, for example, like they're starting to do in Europe as well as in California. So that'll certainly change things.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your time, Steve. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thanks for being on the show, and we look forward to more news from Dana on this E-transition. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mike. Let's stay in touch because things are changing fast.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.